Hey guys, Midnight Strike here, back again to continue on the ACDC discography review with my review of their ninth studio release entitled Flick of the Switch. Now, this is an important album in ACDC's discography because it's the third studio album with Brian Johnson on vocals, it's the last studio album that would see Phil Rudd on drums for another 12 years, and it is the last album, in my opinion, which sees ACDC in their prime, which, in my opinion, again, was 1976 to 1983. 84 if you include 74 Jailbreak, but then again, that's a compilation of songs on their first two albums, so I don't really include that. But if you really want to get all technical, Brian Johnson's vocals really didn't go to shit until around 1985 or 1986, and if you really want to get all technical, maybe 1988, but that is at the latest. So basically, when it comes down to it, I actually really like this album. A lot of people give this album shit because it's the album that was pretty much started the downfall or the commercial decline of AC/DC. They were very popular from 1979 to 1981 with the release of the Mutt Lange albums. These were huge cash grabs, huge money makers, not cash grabs, but money makers in terms of popularity and success. They topped the charts whenever they were first released. And to this day, they are the three albums that define AC/DC practically. So, in my opinion, or like I said, Powerage is better, but then again, that's just my own personal opinion, one AC/DC fan to their audience. But then again, I digress. This is the first studio release that features AC/DC as the production, as the producers, I should say, because they wanted to go for a more edgy, raw feel as opposed to the radio-oriented Back in Black style of production that Mutt Lange actually incorporated into their sound. But then again, they must have liked what Mutt Lange did on For Those About to Rock We Salute You, because it seems like that's what all this is stemming from. I personally loved For Those About to Rock We Salute You. Like I said, it's my second favorite AC/DC album and my favorite of the Brian Johnson era. So basically what they did with that sound was they took what was great about heavy metal and combined it with what was amazing about hard rock, especially in AC/DC's standards. So what they did then was gave it a really raw, really ballsy, and really edgy feel to it that was just in your face practically. And it worked perfectly for Those About to Rock We Salute You. But for this one, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I mean, the production is good and all. It's not necessarily bad like you'd see on the next album, which was also produced by AC/DC, Fly on the Wall, but we'll get to that when we get to that. First, we gotta go through 74 Jailbreak. But anyways, the production on this album is actually quite good when you get down to it. It's very stripped down, it's very simplistic, but it's very also distorted. The production is not necessarily as flat as, say, I'm going to compare it to a different genre now, In Waves by Trivium. Love that album, but hate the production. So the production on this album is actually pretty decent, especially for 1983. And as I said before, it is Phil Rudd's last album that he worked on. Eventually, they would bring in Simon Wright, but first they would actually have B.J. Wilson, a guy by the name of B.J. Wilson, come in and fill in on the drum parts that they were missing. But then again, all the stuff would be scrapped, and I'm not sure necessarily if Simon Wright filled in for Flick of the Switch for some of the drum parts, because I know that they had the demos from when Phil Rudd was still in the band, so I'm not exactly sure if Phil Rudd performed the entirety of the drums, but I do know for a fact that Phil Rudd did perform on this album. So when it gets down to it, this album really didn't have that many hits. It had Flick of the Switch, Rising Power, Nervous Shakedown was another one. Badlands has been covered numerous times. I've actually seen a industrial cover for it. It kind of sucked. The entire album was crap, but it was really interesting to see, especially with that, what they could do with it for the covers, I suppose, for that band. Forget what it was, but it wasn't that good. But it was really a really interesting take on it, I suppose. But when it comes down to it, this is a standard AC/DC album, 10 tracks, and one of the things that really define it is the mixed bag, or I should say the lyrical mixed bag, because up until this point, I mean, for the past 3 years, there had already been rumors about AC/DC or Bon Scott writing down lyrics before he died, and then AC/DC using those lyrics in their future songs, and Brian Johnson just not having any writing credit, because up until this point, AC/DC's lyrics have just been stellar, with the exception of maybe some of the songs off of For Those About to Rock We Salute You. COD comes to mind, but then again, that's just, I guess, nonsensical, purposeful lyrics, just like Riff Raff. But there has been kind of conspiracies that Bon Scott had been writing the AC/DC songs all the way up until 1983, which I'm not sure if I buy into that stuff. I mean, there was another theory that AC/DC had already planned another album with Bon Scott right after the release of Highway to Hell, but then he died, so obviously those plans fell through. I'm not sure if I buy into all those conspiracies, but then again, it does show with the writing credits on this album, because the lyrics aren't that good on some of the songs. I mean, it ranges from, hey, this is actually kind of cool, to, oh my god, what the fuck are they talking about? For example, the opening lines on the first track, Rising Power, Dog Day, Tuesday. What is he talking about? I forget what else it was. Sweat came pouring down. I mean, it's just, they're not really that good for lyric-wise. But then again, there's Guns for Hire. Guns for Hire has some pretty good lyrics. It really reminds me of Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. That's where they kind of get the influence from a little bit, because it's, that kind of like a Hitman kind of thing. But Rising Power really doesn't have all that great of lyrics. What's another one? Deep in the Hole I really didn't like lyrically or structurally, for that matter. I didn't really like that song that much at all. But when it comes down to my favorite lyrically, probably going to have to be either Guns for Hire or Badlands. That just has a really badass kind of feel to it, and it's really catchy. So let me start over, kind of rewind a little bit and do it track by track, because, I have to explain my opinion on every song, because this is an AC/DC album review after all. So let me back up. Rising Power is the album's opener, and it's a very good song. I really like the guitar melodies to it. It's very varied, I suppose. It's got a lot of variation in the structure. It's a little bit more technical than what AC/DC usually does, but it's not necessarily really fast. It's more mid-tempo, but it has a lot of variation in the structure. So the lyrics are kind of lacking, though, because I just can't get into them. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like on their later material, which I will get into a little bit later with concrete examples that I can think of off the top of my head for the later releases, especially on Black Ice. Oh my god, the lyrics are just, ugh. Later Day. Rising Power, good song, shit lyrics. This House is on Fire has got a nice catchy intro, a nice catchy groove as well. I learned how to play it on guitar. It sounds really awesome and epic. Another kind of slower song as well. Not as slow as, say, Rising Power. Well, actually, it is slower than Rising Power, but they kind of both go at the same speed, or feel like they're both going along at the same speed. Flick of the Switch is another one that's got a really catchy intro and a really awesome structure overall. It's just, you can definitely feel how raw and intense this song is, especially in the chorus, where everyone is just giving it their all. I don't know. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. I think this, Guns for Hire, and brain shake, Landslide, and Badlands are my favorites overall. So, Flick of the Switch, though, is a very good song. It could go on, say, Back in Black. It's a little bit more on the radio-friendly side or commercial side, as opposed to, say, Rising Power and This House is on Fire. But then again, I digress. It's a very good song. Nervous Shakedown is another one. And of course, Flick of the Switch. Back to Flick of the Switch. Like I said, it is one of the album's singles. So the next one, Nervous Shakedown, is another one of the album's singles. And it's a little bit slower, a lot more bluesy, and it's got kind of that nonsensical lyrical thing going, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not like the lyrics are lacking, per se. It's just, they don't really make much sense. But it's not as kind of contrived as, say, Rising Power is. So it's a really good song overall, but the guitars are a little bit too simplistic for me. It just kind of sounds like it's repeating the same riff over and over again, and it's just kind of like two little chords, so they could have done a little bit more with that. The next one is Landslide. This one has a very kick-ass intro. I don't know if I can play it on guitar or not. Usually, you know, AC/DC stuff is really simplistic, but like I said, simplicity is the key with AC/DC. They are the kings of simplicity. They define simplicity in hard rock. So Landslide is a little bit more technical. It's kind of like Riff Raff, or the Riff Raff of the album, moreover, but when it comes down to it, it's very raw, very intense, and probably the fastest song on the album. I really like it. One of my favorites, along with Guns for Hire, which honestly could go on Back in Black. If I heard this song out of the blue, you could say it's a bonus track on Back in Black. It sounds exactly like it could go on there, especially with the production, just the sound, the overall vocals, especially with Brian Johnson. It sounds like he's in his prime. This is probably the best song on the album for Brian Johnson's vocals, especially in the tone. So the next one, Deep in the Hole, didn't care for it. Even the intro, the structure, the lyrics are kind of eh. I mean, I know they're trying to be all sexual and kind of clever with their lyrics, but it just doesn't really work here that well anyways. Bedlam in Belgium. This is one where it's okay, I guess. I mean, it's a good song overall, but it just sounds like it's ripping off Shot Down in Flames, especially in the chorus. But the verse structures definitely mixes it up a little bit. It's got a lot of variation in the verse structure. The next one, Badlands, is just badassery at its finest. It's very intense, very dark, and very slow. One of the slower songs on the album, but it definitely doesn't drag on. It definitely is very catchy. It has really good lyrics as well, and very good vocals by Brian Johnson. The last one, Brain Shake, is kind of a more frantic one in the vein of Landslide, and it's a perfect way to close off this album. So overall, I'm going to give this album a solid 9 out of 10. Absolutely love it, and the only thing that I could really say against it is in some of the songs the vocals sound a bit contrived, as well as the lyrics. That's the biggest thing in this album, is some of the lyrics just plain flat out suck. I'm just going to be blunt about it. But overall, it's one of my favorite AC/DC albums. It's the last AC/DC album in their prime, in my opinion. A lot of people give this album flack for whatever reason, but I don't see it as a bad album. So until next time, I will be reviewing 74 Jailbreak, their 1984 EP with Bon Scott on vocals. So, till then, this is Midnight Strike 3625, 9 out of 10, keep calm and rock on.